Good morning and welcome. We appreciate you being here this morning. Again, a couple of topics that we have of interest, certainly when it comes to timing-wise. Want to talk about the dollars that we're spending and propose to spend on street maintenance. Very appropriate as we get into this budget cycle that we're in, and then we also want to talk about some of the bike and pedestrian paths that we are beginning to build out right now. Again, another topic that has had extensive conversations with regard to our budget. One last topic that I want to cover, of course, it's raining today. This is a popular topic, I know, for Ted, maybe even for Steve occasionally. And want to talk about our first full year of the NBC tournament being under the leadership of the new board of directors that we've handed that off to. And before I get into some of this others, just want to share, a few numbers, and you've heard some of this recently. The attendance numbers are up pretty dramatically at the NBC tournament over last year. And again, this is the first full year of the new board that's taken over that tournament. We're pretty excited, even with the rain events that we've had and the other complications. So far, it's been a well-attended tournament. They're doing implementing some new strategies. Pretty excited about the direction that tournament's going in. And I was there last night. Pretty exciting 1-0 ball game. If you like 1-0 ball games, some people like to see those 12-10 ball games. But for a baseball enthusiast, it was an excellent game. And what we would consider the local guys won. Wellington pulled it out in the bottom of the ninth, which was great for the fans and a great celebration on the field, which last night's game guaranteed Wellington a spot in championship week. So it's a lot of fun to see the momentum building out there. Of course, that's a tournament that we purposely kept in this area, and we want to grow that. And so it's pretty exciting. Street maintenance, we'll take a little bit to talk about our new approach. We've really been looking at what we call a 40-year life cycle cost model for our streets, and that will help us as we look at what streets we are trying to preserve, what streets that we need to totally rebuild because of total failure. What we now recognize, and we've done a number of experiments when it comes to surface treatments, and we've had some of this conversation in the community. Why are we going back on a relatively new street and doing some new maintenance? And this is a perfect example. When we talk about biggest bang for our buck, we recognize now if we continue in these relatively inexpensive treatments on a new road, we can keep the condition of that road up for the entire lifetime, for almost a 40-year cycle of that road, where traditionally we've built a new road and then won't go back and do regular maintenance for a number of years until it deteriorates under a certain level. What we now recognize is it's almost like repainting your house. If we put new paint down, the house stays new for its entire life cycle instead of letting the paint deteriorate to the point where you got to replace the siding on the house. This allows us to keep the road up where we don't have to replace the road. It keeps it up for the whole life cycle. Is that fair enough? At the city's council direction, we have increased the funding level that we are spending on streets. We increased it by $2 million. It used to be $6 million. It's now up to $8 million a year. Since 2014 and 2019, we're proposing an additional $2 million in that capital improvement program to just look at the kind of maintenance that we're doing on streets. This increases the street preservation that I talked about, the combined new approach, that we are already seeing significant improvement in the number of lane miles. I've shared this before. Up until recent times, our average of lane miles that we can recondition in a year has been about 72 lane miles. This year, we're going to improve 446 lane miles of streets. So that's pretty significant. Since the beginning of 2014, more than 80% of the lane miles receiving preservation work have been all residential streets. So we will continue to focus on residential streets. In addition, the proposed budget would add this year an additional $250,000 that we have found to do spot repairs and do a little bit of improvements on unpaved street dust control near area schools. This additional spot repair funding will cover the cost to treat an additional 14 lane miles of those streets that I talked about. That dust control funding will lower the amount of dust in the air on unpaved streets within 100 feet of all of the area schools that are impacted by those dirt streets. First and Second Street bike project I want to get into now. Again, this has been a focus from a number of community discussions. One of the things that we recognize now is that the number one leisure activity, and I know we're focusing on bikes here, but is building out these multi-use paths. The number one regional leisure activity for folks today is walking for pleasure. I know Councilmember Meissner runs for pleasure. I still don't understand that one. So we understand if we're going to impact the quality of life for a lot of the people that we represent, it's building out these bike and walk paths. Few people, before I get into this, that I do want to recognize, besides Alan King that's sitting here, our city engineer Paul Gunzelman has joined us. Scott Wadle, who obviously is Mr. Pathway now. And then Jack Brown, thank you for joining us. Appreciate that. And I apologize, I didn't realize you were going to join us too. Thank you, Jamie. The City of Wichita is working to implement this bicycle master plan, and so over the course of the next 3 weeks, the city will be installing the First and Second Street bike lanes through downtown. And to demonstrate some of that, I have a really short video that we are going to play.
Help share the road and be courteous on Wichita streets. City government and its partners are working to make getting around the city on a bicycle easier, safer, and more convenient. Bike lanes provide a separate space for bicycling, help the flow of traffic, and let drivers know where to expect people bicycling. Here's a quick overview of the different types of bike lanes. A solid line means that drivers should not cross into the bike lane except to pull into a driveway or parking stall. A dashed line means that cars can cross it for turning. Please remember to look for bicyclists before you turn. Green markings help make the lanes more visible and let drivers know that they need to look out for people bicycling, including those approaching from behind. If you are in a car and need to cross a bike lane, please remember that bikes have the right of way and be sure to look before turning. State law requires drivers to provide 3 feet between the vehicle and people bicycling. On wider streets, some bike lanes have a buffer area. The buffered bike lane provides extra space for bicycling. Remember, people should not ride or drive into the buffer area. Please be especially careful when opening your car door. You are required by state law to make sure that it is safe and that you will not interfere with traffic, including people bicycling on the street. Let's all do our part to be courteous on Wichita streets. City of Wichita, serving you in many ways every day.
That project specifically, when I talk about some of the benefits that you can see, it's going to improve the safety of everyone using our streets. It certainly is going to help smooth traffic by providing the separate lanes as you've seen. Add additional 24-hour on-street parking by removing some time restrictions. Provide a significant connection for bicycling through downtown, connecting neighborhoods, employment centers, and bikeways, and help implement our downtown plan and bicycle plan. And all the while improving the mobility, health, and economic development of our city. Here are some of the details from the project. The project will go from Grove to Seneca on 1st and 2nd Streets. At least one traffic lane will remain open during construction. Construction is expected to last approximately 3 weeks. We're asking for people to be patient. as with any change, it takes a little time to get used to the lane markings. Certainly want to be observant to you as you use the roadway. And again, if you have any questions or concerns and issues on how all of this is going to work and get coordinated, I would encourage you to call Scott Wadle. I would be happy to give you his personal cell phone if you need it.
We can do it if we have to.
And at this point, be happy to take any questions. We do have some council members that have joined us. I ran Pete off by questioning his desire to run the river every day. But we have Council Member Brian Fry and the Vice Mayor back here with us too this morning. So any questions that you might have for myself or the staff that have joined us today?
Can we talk a little bit more about those bike lanes? So the installation is for First and Second Street. Where exactly will these be at? And we've seen a few of them already down south in South Wichita.
They're going to be in between First and Second Street. No, you want Scott?
Yeah, the project for First and Second Street will extend from the existing bike lanes where they currently end over I-135. We're actually going to go back a little bit further to the east, and we're going to revisit that section from Grove to I-135, and then they'll continue west all the way out to Seneca. So it'll effectively get you from the College Hill area and at the Crown Uptown, but the neighborhoods over in that area all the way out to Delano through downtown.
In Crown Heights?
Crown Heights, yes sir, thank you.
Have you seen an increased number of pedestrians or bicyclists around that area? Is that why this area was chosen?
Good question. In terms of levels of bicycling, we use a variety of means of measuring that. They all have their advantages and disadvantages. One of them is that we do point-in-time counts through the MPO, which coordinates federal transportation funding in our region. Those counts are showing the counts were point-in-time, so about 2 times per year. They showed relatively flat levels. But when we look at the census data about journey to work, we're seeing increases in number of people who commute primarily by a bicycle. So we are seeing increasing numbers in anecdotal evidence from Strava and also just from talking to folks. It sounds like people are seeing more bicyclists out on the street. So that's what we're hearing.
Another thing that we have noticed is when we were driving south on Seneca near West High School, we have now seen on the road bicycle lanes. That's something new. Can you kind of elaborate what folks might be seeing new around that area and why it's important?
Sure. Those are shared lane markings, and the shared lane markings extend from Delano, pretty much from the clock tower. And what they do is they take you south to West High and then eventually move south and west to get you to Glen. And if you go to the Wichita Bicycle Master Plan, you can kind of see what the long-term plans are and how that connects. But that facility really opens up access and provides a vital connection for people bicycling to get access down to and from southwest Wichita.
And I'll tell you from personal experience, because I took this ride just last week. Occasionally I will ride my bike to dinner with some friends, and so I rode from far west Wichita to Old Town and was able to ride all of the way either on a dedicated bike path or a lane marker until I got to Douglas and the river, and then from there I just simply rode on the street to Old Town on no dedicated markings at that point. But for my own safety, certainly I appreciate having those dedicated markers or a dedicated bike path to be able to ride comfortably. And again, I know that you can't always tell it, but I ride regularly on my bike and enjoy that as both a means of exercise and a leisure activity with some friends. And we often ride to dinner, and we'll change up routes for that.
As a bicyclist, you mentioned that you do appreciate these markings. can you also elaborate, as a bicyclist, your experiences with maybe drivers not seeing you at times? Talk about...
Always a little nervous when we're on a common roadway that has no separation, no dedicated marking, and by law we have to ride obviously with the traffic coming up behind us, and been a number of times where we've been a little worried about who's coming up behind us. Are they texting? Are they paying attention to the roadway? And unfortunately, it only takes one tragic accident that brings more attention to that, and one's too many. Certainly, if it's my tragic accident, one's way too many. So, always a little nervous. So I'm excited about what we're doing in terms of building out our bike paths and our walking paths too, and being able to travel across the city in a number of different ways safely, and being more aware of those separations between motorists and bicyclists, and we're seeing more bicyclists all the time. Certainly for exercise, leisure activity, and then also as a mode of transportation to get to work. But it has increased just in the few years that I've been cycling regularly. No hard questions for Alan?
On street preservation, are there any particular problem areas that need to be addressed pretty urgently, or is this more of a just get to what you can?
We have, in fact, you can go online, and Alan can address this, but we have a map, or Paul, whoever wants to address this, we have a map of where that preservation is going to be taking place. Certainly there's greater need than we have funding. As I mentioned last week, one of the opportunities that we're looking at is if we can sell an asset that we have and do it the right way and carry those funds over into a pretty aggressive neighborhood streets program. That's something we're going to look at. We know that we can do that and catch up. But there is very definite reasons to why we're putting money into this set of streets and preservation, and it's because we can continue to save them. There are some streets out there that are beyond the treatments that we can do, and so we just simply have to make the decision at that point, when can we rebuild them totally. But the exciting thing is regardless of where we find a new pot of money, we're continually putting more dollars into that program so we can eventually catch up. Anything you need to add to that?
Say you can put another $250,000 for spot repairs
this year.
For 2015.
Right. Actually, I'm sorry. It'll be in the 2016 budget. That's what we are getting ready to approve in August. Our new budget for 2016. In that budget, we're recommending approval of an additional $250,000 for those spot repairs on everything, on top of everything else we're doing.
You're not reallocating any money from anywhere to get that? Or?
No, that is we have, fortunately, in this budget, a slight bump in additional revenue because of everything that we've been doing, and much of that has to do with what we have done in past years, where we have kind of a paradigm shift in the way that we focus on what government's role is. As I mentioned before, we have started privatizing some of the things that we do regularly in government, and it's saving us money. And now that we're finally starting to see smidgets of growth, we're going to continue to do those things that have saved us money, and it's a permanent position change for the city. A great example is the mowing services. We save $1 million annually. I've mentioned that multiple times. That's not something we shifted to just because of budget necessity. That's a permanent shift in the way we deliver services. And so we're starting to see the benefit now, and so the $250,000 is new dollars on top of everything else that we've appropriated. Well, thank you all.
Quick question. Sorry, this is unrelated to the topics that we've been on today, but just curious if the city leaders have had any more discussion about the status of the Confederate flag, on what our plans are to do.
We haven't. The veterans are putting together a proposal right now that they're going to bring forward to us on how they would like to address that issue. And when I say veterans, a very specific group that are board of directors for the Veterans Memorial Park. And so that group of veterans is bringing a proposal forward that we will eventually figure out how to fit that into a council agenda item and allow the public to weigh in and eventually the council to vote on it. Still trying to work it out on how the park board plays their role in that piece. And so there's logistically some things that need to get worked out, but we're letting the veterans bring a proposal to us that will decide that issue.
Any kind of timeline on that?
At best guess now, we thought maybe 1st of August. That could be pushed back a little bit, but somewhere in August.